Hi everyone, this is Miss McBlain here. Today you're going to be looking at the digestive system. If you are working on pen and paper, or if you are working in your book, if you have it, please can you make sure you're writing down today's date and title and that it is underlined before you move on to the lesson. Today we are looking at the digestive system. We have a whole load of new keywords that we're going to look at. Some of them you might know and some of them might be new to you. And that's absolutely fine. Why are we looking at the digestive system? Well, we're looking at it because human life depends upon the tissues and organs of the digestive system working together to support the life processes of each cells from which we are made. You might like to remind yourself about these words. So you might think, what is a tissue? What is an organ? And what is the digestive system? So you might want to pause the video here, or if you're ready to move on, that's absolutely fine. But just to summarise, a tissue is a group of similar cells working together. A group of tissues, when they work together, is called an organ. And when you have a group of organs working together, you end up with an organ system. And in this case, we have the digestive system. So the digestive system is made up of different organs and different tissues. But ultimately, it goes down to cell level. We have a list here of organs, and we also have a diagram of the digestive system. What I'd like you to do is have a go at labelling the diagram. You can do it on paper or you can do it in the PowerPoint. I am expecting everyone to have a labelled diagram by the end of the lesson when you submit it. So if you don't know one of them, you can leave it out to the end and then figure out where it will go. But give it a go, spend 5 minutes and try to label the organs of the digestive system. Welcome back everyone, hopefully you've given it a good go. Don't worry when we go through the answers if you have got any of them wrong, because you can always correct them and learn from it for next time. So this is it correctly labelled. You might want to pause the video before you press play, where I will give you a description of each of the organs. So the first one that we've got is the mouth. So the mouth up here is the site of mechanical and also the site of chemical digestion. So the teeth involved will help mechanically digest the food, and the chemical digestion is where in the mouth you have the saliva, which is produced by the salivary glands, and that there is producing the enzyme which breaks down carbohydrates. So if you're eating a sandwich which is rich in carbohydrates, it will start to be broken down in the mouth. If you're eating something that contains protein, it will not be chemically digested in the mouth. It will just be mechanically broken down. Once it has been broken down in the mouth, it's going to go through the esophagus and into the stomach. The esophagus is very thick and muscular, and it's similar to a toothpaste tube, and if you push the tube from one end, it's going to push the toothpaste out. So it's a bit similar to that, and it's got very strong muscles around the outside that are going to push it down. In the stomach, it's a bag-like structure that is going to help mechanically churn the food, but it is also going to have some enzymes in it which are secreted from the pancreas, and these enzymes are going to help with the chemical digestion as well as the mechanical digestion. The stomach is also very acidic. It consists of hydrochloric acid, and after the stomach we are going to go and look at the liver. The liver here has a substance called bile, which is produced and stored in the gallbladder, and it helps to emulsify fats, which means to break down fats. After the stomach, we're going to go into the small intestine, which is the site of absorption, and this is where most of our digestion has finished by this point, so most of our absorption of nutrients is going to happen before it moves on to the large intestine, where water is absorbed. When all of our food has had the water's been absorbed from it, we've had most of the absorption happen in the small intestine, digestion has taken place, and now egestion can occur. So feces is stored in the rectum, and feces consists of the food that cannot be digested, and it is expelled from the anus. Which organs are a part of the human digestive system? Pause the video, circle the correct answer before moving on. Well done if you put down the esophagus, the intestine, and the stomach, because they are correct. The lungs are a part of the respiratory system. Red pen, correct your answer and get ready to move on. So now that we know our correct answers, try to match them up with the function. Pause the video now and match them up. The stomach is where the food is stored and churned. The intestine is the place where digestion happens, and most of the absorption happens in the small intestine. The esophagus is where food is transported from the mouth to the stomach. Again, red pen, mark your answers and get ready to move on to the next slide. So how do we get energy from food? We've talked about digestion, but how do we get energy from it? Have a think. We get energy from food from this process called digestion. But what actually is digestion? We've spoken a lot already about food breaking down, but what actually is it? What is the definition? The definition is when you break down large insoluble food molecules into small soluble food molecules. So this is a key definition here that you need to learn. And why is this important? Well, it's important because these large insoluble food molecules, they're too big to be absorbed by the bloodstream. But if they're small and soluble, what can happen is through the lining of the small intestine, they can be absorbed and they can be transported via the blood. And when we can get the energy from this absorption, it can be transported by the bloodstream to all of the cells within our body. You might want to write down these key definitions, because digestion isn't just breaking down food. It's to do with large insoluble molecules and small soluble food molecules. I've attached the link to this video on the Google Classroom, but I've also put it on the PowerPoint. So I'd like you to pause this video and go into Google Classroom and watch this YouTube video about the digestive system. Welcome back. Hopefully you found that video quite informative and you are now ready to move on. We're going to have a look at the journey of an egg sandwich. And it's important that we look at an egg sandwich because it contains proteins, carbohydrates and fats. So the protein is in the egg. We've got some cheese and we've got some butter, which is the fats. And we also have the carbohydrates, which is the bread. So first of all, when our egg sandwich goes into our mouth, digestion begins immediately. And it starts to mechanically be broken down by our teeth. So in this case, we've got a little bit of sushi here, but if we were thinking about our egg sandwich, it's going to go into our mouth and be broken down. There's also going to take place is chemical digestion. So the saliva, as I mentioned, in the mouth is going to secrete an enzyme which is going to break down carbohydrates. After it has been mechanically and potentially chemically broken down, depending on what's in there, it's going to go down the esophagus. The esophagus, you can see it's got very thick walls to it, and they're very muscular. And when they contract these muscles, the food is going to be forced downwards, and this is called peristalsis. So it's like the toothpaste tube, it's going to be squeezed down, and you can actually feel this sometimes, maybe when you eat something that you've not broken down with your teeth as well as you should have, and you can feel it moving down into the stomach. Once it reaches the stomach, this is where the food goes into, and this is a muscular bag that is filled with hydrochloric acid. So it's a pH of 1 to 2. 1 to 2, which is very, very acidic. So you might want to have a look at the pH scale, and you can see where it lies on there. Two things happen in the stomach. The first is that it is chemically broken down. So the food is going to be chemically broken down with enzymes. And there's also going to be, the reason that it is very acidic is because microbes are going to be destroyed. This means that if there's any bad bacteria or harmful pathogens in our food, they're going to be destroyed in the stomach, and it will stop you getting poorly. There are 3 very important organs or glands to the digestive system, and we've touched upon them already. The first is the liver. The liver makes bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. So the liver makes bile, and it's stored here. So it's basically like a waiting area for the stomach. The bile is really important because it emulsifies, which means to break up fats. And what happens is the bile is secreted into the stomach when it's needed. So if we look here, and it also neutralises the acid from the stomach in the small intestine. So some of the acid is going to pass through, but because we've got bile mixed in with the food and the hydrochloric acid, when it goes into the small intestine, it's going to be neutralised. The other gland, so it is a gland that we've got, is called the pancreas. The pancreas sits over the top of the stomach, and it is very important because it produces and makes enzymes which are released into the small intestine, which is going to help with digestion. So some people that have problems with their pancreas, they're going to have problems with producing these enzymes, which are really important for digestion and absorption, mainly digestion. So if you have pancreatic cancer, for example, so your pancreas is not working properly, then you might become quite skinny, or you might lose weight rapidly because you're not able to efficiently digest food. So the pancreas is very, very important, as is the liver. If you had problems with your liver, you might not be able to produce the bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. So you might not be able to digest fatty foods very easily. And again, if you had something potentially wrong with the gallbladder, you might have problems with the secretion of bile, which is important. But again, there's lots of treatments for these things, but it's quite nice to be aware of the role that they play within the digestive system. So moving on now to the small intestine, because we just touched upon it. The small intestine is where food goes from the stomach. It enters the small intestine where digestion is completed. So at this point, when it enters the small intestine, digestion has finished. So what's going to happen now is mainly absorption. The food molecules are going to be absorbed, and they're going to enter our bloodstream for the first time. So it's been broken down into small soluble molecules, so they're now small enough to be absorbed, and they're going to pass from the lining, so the outside of the small intestine, into our bloodstream. The small intestine is covered in villi, and this increases the surface area to increase absorption of nutrients. So if you look at this diagram here, we've got a zoomed in picture. Each one of these are called villi, and there are lots of them. And that means that if we have a look, if I draw some lines on here, this is the area which absorption can happen. And every single one of these, absorption can happen at the surface. And that means that there is a massive load of extra surface area across each one of these. And that means that more absorption can take place of nutrients. If it was just a straight line and we just had a straight, flat small intestine without this extra surface area, then we're not going to have very much absorption taking place. It's going to be limited. If we look at the villi in more detail, we can have a look. So if we look on this one, just click back off that. If we have a look at this, we erase all this information here. So you can see that we have got the villi, this structure here, and then if we look on each little one here, we have what are called microvilli. So each one of these is called microvilli, and these microvilli also have hair-like structures on them for more absorption. So you are getting the absorption on every single one of these, but you're also getting absorption on every single little microvilli as well. So villi, they are very important. They have small walls, thin walls, and a large surface area. They also have a very good supply of blood. So on this diagram you can see the red is indicating the oxygenated blood and the blue is representing the deoxygenated blood. Although blood is all red, it's just nice to be able to tell the difference. And this rich supply of blood is important because once food has been absorbed into the small intestine, it means because there's a rich supply of blood, it can be transported quickly and efficiently around the rest of the body. In comparison, if you didn't have a rich supply of blood, it means the process is going to happen a lot slower. And this is just demonstrating here about surface area. So if you had a surface area that was very flat, it means that digestion or absorption, not digestion, can only happen across here. However, this one, we can see that it's going up and down. We've got a large surface area. If we were to stretch this out, it would probably go all the way to over here. So you have more surface because absorption can happen on every single little villi that we've got, which is an increase in the surface area. Moving on then from the small intestine, we're going into the large intestine, and this is where the remains of any undigested food, water and dead cells travel into. So by now absorption has happened. It's happened in the small intestine. It is mostly completely over, and now we're just going to absorb the water. The water is very valuable, and so it's absorbed into the bloodstream. Waste material that cannot be digested or used in the body is going to then travel into the rectum. And this is where it's stored until it leaves the body through the anus. If you have an upset stomach, maybe you have an infection and your food is travelling very fast through the large intestine, the water is not going to be absorbed very easily, which means that when that happens, it's moving very fast and it's going to be very runny, which means that you're going to have diarrhea because not all of the water has been absorbed, which is why it's really important if you have diarrhea to drink lots of water and other fluids, because you are losing quite a lot of water that is of value to the body. I've now got a link attached on Google Classroom and also into the PowerPoint, which is a person who is demonstrating the digestive system. And it's quite a good video, and I would do it in the classroom if you were there. So give it a watch. I think it's about 5 minutes long, and then come back to this video to finish the rest of the lesson. Welcome back. Hopefully you found the video quite fun and interactive, and you were able to identify what was going to happen next, and you could anticipate what each part of the organ system was going to do. The next video, which I would like you to have a look at, is a demonstration of the gut, mainly looking at the small intestine. So it's hard to imagine, but the small intestine, by that point you've got those small soluble molecules, and they're going to be absorbed across the surface of the small intestine into the bloodstream. So this model is going to demonstrate that happening. And I say it's hard to imagine because it's mainly liquids that are involved. They're not solid at this point. And so in this demonstration, it shows you the movement of those molecules. We've got viscin tubing, and it's basically a very thin membrane, a very thin piece of material. And it allows some molecules to enter, but not all of them. And in this example, we've got glucose solution, which is sugar solution. So that would be similar to our sugar being inside the small intestine. And we've also got water in the beaker. So it's submersed into water. And what's going to happen in this experiment is it's tied at either end, which means the glucose cannot escape from the viscin tubing, which is the small intestine in this example. But what's going to happen is you should see diffusion taking place. So the glucose is going to diffuse from the small intestine into the bloodstream, which is the water in this example. And you'll see the movement of molecules across this membrane, and it's demonstrating how the small intestine works. So watch that video, pause this one and come back when you are ready. Welcome back everyone. Hopefully you found the video of some use and you were able to start to think about why it's a good model and a good demonstration of the small intestine. Moving on now, have a little think. What happens to the food we eat? What happens to it? Does it A, all of it stays in the body? Does it B, some of it stays in the body and some of it leaves the body? Or is it C, all of it leaves the body? Circle which one you think is the correct answer, or write it down. Well done if you put that it's B. I'm not going to tell you the answer because I'd like you to come up with an explanation for it. So is it A, the goodness is taken out of the food and then we get rid of the rest? Is it B, the food is digested and nutrients are absorbed, then we get rid of the rest? Is it C, the food is broken down and turned into poo, which we get rid of? Is it D, the food is used to make us grow bigger and taller? Pause the video, select your answer. Well done if you've put down it's B. So the food is digested and the nutrients is absorbed and then we get rid of the rest. The first one is technically accurate, but it's not very scientific. The goodness, we don't really know what the goodness is. The goodness is the nutrients. And get rid of the rest, it does do that, but it doesn't mention about absorption. C, it mentions that food is broken down and turned into poo, but it doesn't mention the fact that we absorb any nutrients. And D, the food is used to make us grow bigger and taller. It's not really the food, it's more about the nutrients and the molecules within the food that we use to get energy, to make our cells to grow, repair, and so on. So make sure that you mark your answer. If you got it correct, well done. If you didn't, that's fine. Just make sure that you correct it and I can see your correction. So moving on then, I'd like you to pause the video, go into the PowerPoint, and I'd like you to try and match up the organ with the correct function that we have gone through already. So pause the video and spend about 5 minutes going through the answers. Welcome back everyone. We're going to go through the answers. I'm going to go through them quite quickly, so you might want to pause the video at the end. The mouth is where digestion starts. It involves the teeth, the food is mixed with saliva, and the carbohydrate enzyme is found within saliva. The rectum is where food that contains cellulose that cannot be digested It's stored and then it's removed through the process of egestion. The large intestine or large intestines, this is where water is absorbed. The esophagus is where it links the mouth and the stomach. The pancreas is where those important enzymes are produced. So protease, carbohydrates and lipase. The liver is where bile is produced. Bile is also important because it helps to neutralise the acidity in the stomach, making it the correct conditions for when it enters the small intestine. And then that leaves the stomach, is where food mixes with protease enzymes to digest proteins. It is also full of hydrochloric acid, which is very acidic. Pause the video here if you need to correct your answers, otherwise get ready to move on. As mentioned at the start, we said we were going to have a look at the journey of our egg sandwich. We looked at where it would travel to in the organs within the body, and we mentioned that it contained fat, protein and carbohydrates. And we mentioned a lot to do with these enzymes, but what actually do enzymes do? So we've spoken about mechanical digestion, but now we're going to look at chemical digestion in more detail. Enzymes in your digestive system work on the outside of cells. They break down big molecules to make smaller ones that can enter your blood. So the fats, proteins and carbohydrates, they consist of large insoluble molecules which are too big to be absorbed. So they have to be broken down mechanically and also through these enzymes. So they're going to work on the outside of the cells to break them down and cut them up so they can become small soluble ones. There are lots of different enzymes and they all do different jobs. Each enzyme will only work on a certain type of food molecule. So we've got 3 different workers here. So these are 3 different enzymes and they're going to work in different ways. The first one is we've got a large molecule. It's insoluble, it cannot be absorbed, and what's going to happen, this enzyme called carbohydrase even, is going to break down the carbohydrate into smaller molecules. So they work by cutting them up on the outside and we are left with glucose. So starch is broken down into smaller molecules of glucose. So big starch molecules, carbohydrates breaks it down into small glucose molecules, and this allows us to get energy. The next enzyme we're going to look at is called protease. Protease works on these large molecules which are insoluble, and they are protein molecules. They're very, very big. The egg in our sandwich contains that protein, and we really want to absorb it because it's really beneficial for repair and growth of our cells. So what's going to happen is the big molecule is going to be broken down by the protease enzyme, working away to break it down on the outside, and it's going to break it down into amino acids. So in this case, we've got protein being broken down by protease into amino acids. The last one that we're going to look at is called lipase. So you can see that they all end in ASE. And if we go back, we can see carbohydrase breaks down carbohydrates. Protease breaks down proteins. And lipase breaks down lipids. And lipids are fats. So butter and oil, which are found in our egg sandwich, are fats. And this is a fat molecule here. You can see the lovely structure of a fat molecule. And it's a very big molecule, and it's going to be broken down by lipase enzymes. And it's going to be broken down into fatty acid and glycerol. And it's really good for helping to build cell membranes and supply energy. So they each are important: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins for different things. And they are each broken down into different substances and by different enzymes. So to summarise, what I'd like you to do is on the PowerPoint slide, you can pause it and you can go in and you can actually write the answers to this down, or you can do it in your book. So we've got the name of the different enzyme. So we've got carbohydrates, we've got protease, and we've got lipase. And they break down different things. But what does it break it down into? And for a bonus, you could also write down where is it produced. So you can go back through the work and try and find where it is produced. But it's really good to just summarise these two things so you know what it breaks down and what it's broken down into. So pause the video, spend about 5 minutes finding out the answers, and come back into the video for the answers. Welcome back everyone. Hopefully you have completed your table. Hopefully you found it a little bit challenging, maybe finding out these ones, and I'm sure you all did a fantastic job. So we're going to go through the answers. So using your red pen, making sure that you're correct in your work. This says amylase. Now amylase, I haven't corrected this, but amylase is a type of carbohydrates. But you could write it down. Carb. It's very hard to draw on this. It looks awful, but so it's also carbohydrates. It breaks down starch and it breaks it down into glucose. It's made in the salivary glands, the small intestine, and in the pancreas. Protease breaks down proteins into amino acids, and it's made in the stomach, the small intestine, and the pancreas. Lipase breaks down fats, and it breaks it down into glycerol and fatty acids. And it's produced in the small intestine and the pancreas. So well done if you got that correct. Make sure that you mark it. You give yourself a mark. Well done. I'm sure you all did fantastic. And we have one little thing left to do for this lesson. So you might want to pause the video before you move on. The last thing what I'd like you to do is to decide whether these are true or false. Ignore this bit here. So you can just write down 1, true or false, and so on. So pause the video and write down your answers. Welcome back. Hopefully you have all now written your answers, whether they are true or false. So the first one, amylase. It is false. Amylase does not break down proteins. I did mention that amylase is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates or amylase breaks down starch. Number 2, the esophagus is a muscular tube. That is true. It contracts and pushes the food down. Number 3, the stomach contains hydrochloric acid. This is true. It's acidic, so it can help destroy any microbes or pathogens. Number 4 is false. The kidneys do not make bile. The bile is produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Number 5, lipase breaks down fats. This is true because lipase works on lipids and lipids are fats. 6, absorption of nutrients takes place in the large intestines. is false. It happens in the small intestine. Number 7, glucose is a product of protein digestion. This is false because it occurs with the breaking down of starch, which is carbohydrate digestion. Number 8, there are thousands of villi in the small intestine to help with absorption. True. Well done. Number 9, the waste collect and store in the rectum before excretion. That's true. Number 10, the pancreas does not play an important role in digestion. That is false. It's very, very important. So what I'd like you to do now is upload all of your answers for this lesson, and then I'd like you to go on to quizzes and complete the online quiz there for me. Well done, thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed learning about the digestive system. It is quite a lot of content to take in, so make sure that you go back through the PowerPoint if you need to. If you finished early, I will put some links up on Google Classroom for you to do as well. Happy learning, and I look forward to seeing you again.